exit planning, to me, I look at it deeper and I think, what is it that you're exiting to?
Yeah,
You
said you have to have a place that you're running towards.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. Hang out with a new friend, I would say, and a great name, another Scott from Serving Strong, and a face that you'll see new to the EPI community. A shout out to Justin Goodbread for making the original introduction. Scott really concentrates and is an expert on the personal planning concepts that we teach at the Exit Planning Institute. So he's joining us here on Season 3 of the Exit Is Now podcast, but you'll also see him this quarter as an instructor, as a faculty member inside of our EPI Academy, and you'll see him at the Exit Planning Summit in May. So jumping like all in. So hopefully you have a good ride here at the Exit Planning Institute, but welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Scott. It has been a great ride. I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
And you've been also speaking over at Tom Bronson's event. Tom, also a certified exit planning advisor, kind of a cool event because you go direct to owners delivering the message that you have. Has that been kind of a unique experience for you too? Speaking to fellow owners?
It has. It's been a great experience to connect with owners at a personal level. It's been
very interesting. So I want to talk through kind of your story and then lead into what you're doing today. So what I was telling Scott before he kind of just went on the air, it's really cool to sit with a business owner, right? And you've had two totally different businesses, right? The one that you're in now and the one that you came from. So let's kind of start with your story at the beginning, right? A second generation family business. So tell us about it.
Yeah, my dad was a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
His dad was going through a building program.
Here in Ohio?
Yeah, here in Ohio.
Yeah, cool.
Over in Youngstown.
Yep.
And he was going through a building program, and the contractor had inflated the final invoice and skipped town. So Dad stepped in, found some financing, got the project finished, and someone said there ought to be a company exist to see this never happens to churches again. So Dad started helping another church, and before long, he's really starting to get this thing going. And I started back, let's see, that would have been 1970 that he incorporated.
Okay.
I joined him in 1989 when I was 24.
Okay.
I spent the next 24 years as a COO of the business. I had a great run. We had district offices all across America, with Glendale, Kansas City, here in Youngstown, Allentown, PA, Charlotte, Beaufort, South Carolina, and Clearwater, Florida.
Wow.
And we were doing 40 million.
Yeah.
It was 70 employees. I'm one of 5 kids. So Dad reached this point where he said, am I going to ride this horse until it dies, or will I make it big enough so my kids could have the option if they want
to get in?
Now, we all had to make it outside of the business.
That was going to be one of my questions, right? And so we've had guests on here that are family business owners. And me and my dad have always had this debate, right? I think that's like the one debate I might have won with my dad is that he always said, like, hey, go get a college degree, and then if we want to do business together. We didn't have a family business that I could enter at the time, but Dad and I knew that we wanted to do business together. But he said, go get like a business management degree, concentration entrepreneurship, see where we land, and see if we can come back into business. So you have a similar kind of Dad made you go out to come because you were 24, so you had to be out of college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we had to. He didn't want us wondering if we would ever be able to make it outside of our business, which is ironic given my story.
Yeah, right. Really all circle, right?
So we all worked in the business at some point, and I mean, it was a great run. We loved what we did, and then 2008 happened.
Yes.
The bubble burst, and we blindly figured it was just another downturn. I mean, I remember my dad talking about being able to stay in business during the Jimmy Carter interest rates.
Yeah, right.
Double-digit interest rates. Yeah, I remember him saying it was hard to get jobs, but once you did, they were profitable. So we just figured this was another downturn
that you can navigate, right?
Yeah, so we just kept, we tightened things up and we kept working, but we were not getting sales. So for 5 years, we were in a slump. until 2013, when the board of directors, which we put in place because there was no interest in the third generation. So we knew there would likely be a CEO that was not a family member. So we instituted an advisory board that turned into a governing board to direct the family's wishes.
So just pause there because this is unique, right? So is your father driving like that board, saying like, "Look, we know," or was that like you and your brothers and sister?
It was my brothers and I.
Yeah.
My sister wasn't in the business at the time, but we were all sitting around the table at a lunch at what we called a development group. That's what we called ourselves.
Okay.
We would meet monthly or quarterly. I can't remember. And I remember that lunch where we all just kind of sat there thinking, the third generation, none of our kids want to do this.
Right.
And that was the spark. So we need to get a board set up. So my dad and I built out this whole, who do we look for?
Yeah.
What do they have to have in place?
Yeah, it's very forward
And
thinking for sure.
That advisory board got in place. It turned into a governing board, and they were in place at this point. 2008 happens, 5 years slide. The board of directors came to me and said, would you assume the role of CEO with the sole responsibility of reinventing our family business? Because whatever we're doing
Isn't working.
and have done for 40 years is not working. I'm a whiteboard guy, so I had a 3 foot by 5 foot whiteboard in my office, and I would fill it with just thoughts, quotes, strategic planning, flow charts, all that. And I would fill a whiteboard, and then I would step back, take a picture of it with a camera, and then wipe it off and fill it again. I must have filled dozens of whiteboards.
Yeah.
But that whiteboarding process began to germinate an idea.
Okay.
So it was a whole different business plan, and we were on our way doing that. And we're about 2 years into it. 2015 came along, and we were still struggling, but we had hope. And there was light at the end of the tunnel, as they say.
Yeah.
But the 5-year slide made us vulnerable to one project that had to start in June of 2015. Now, at this point, our line of credit's maxed out. We have $20 million in various stages of design in backlog. We're working toward that. We don't make money until it goes into construction.
Right.
So we oversee the design process so that it can go into construction.
Yeah, okay.
While we're doing this, we have a couple of projects closing out.
Mm-hmm.
And then in June of 2015, this pivotal project would bridge us to the next project and the next project. And I remember waiting on the project manager's call.
Yeah, because it's such a big deal for your company.
Really, everybody, all eyes were on this. I mean, I was having weekly meetings just to keep people focused and hopeful. You know, we're doing what we need to do. At this point, we had gone from 70 employees down to 12.
Oh, so wildly different than
Yeah.
it was. So this is what you were saying. This is 2015, and before the recession. So what was it? 2007 or 2009 basically was the recession, right?
2008.
Yeah, 2008 was your big slump. So yeah, very quickly, like 4 or 5 years, the company had drastically changed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, what a wild time to be asked to become the CEO too. You're like, oh man, like this is a tough day here. What a big responsibility.
It was really tough. We did some Black Mondays.
Yeah.
Where we would go into one office with a packet and say, we have to let you go, not because of your performance, but because we can't afford to keep you. Here's a packet of information. There's everything we can do for you. Take 5 minutes. You can leave whenever you want. And the HR director and I would leave that office and go to the next one, do the same thing, go to the next one. You know, at one point we let like 7 people go on one
Monday.
Yeah.
That had to be so tough, like also personally for you, because it seems like you're kind of like me in the sense that like these are a lot, though they're not my family members, we're a pretty close group of folks, right? And so like having to look at somebody that again isn't family, but has been in the trenches with me and say, look, it's not because of performance, but it's just because we can't do this right now.
Right.
That had to be a toll.
The average tenure of the employees was over 10 years, 10, 15 years.
Wow. What did you learn kind of during that time? Like where you had to go do these Black Mondays?
Well, I was raised in a Christian home.
Okay.
Married a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
And my dad's a preacher's kid. This was the test. This was a real test.
Yeah.
And I learned to trust.
Yeah.
Quite a bit and just do what I knew we needed to do and keep the integrity and treat people the best that we can as we go forward.
Yeah.
And do do all the right moves that we think we should make.
Right.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
so it was difficult.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go back to, you were talking about 2015, June, right? You said it was
Yep.
June 2015, waiting on the project manager's call.
Waiting on the project manager's call. I get the call. Steve calls me and says, "Steve, how's it going?" Expecting him to say, "Well, we got the thing started." Instead, he said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, the pastor has been having an affair with the secretary." And the news came out in June of 2015. And, I describe it a lot like those of us who like to drive a little fast, and you look in the rearview mirror and you see blue lights flashing, and your stomach just drops to your bowels, and you go, "Oh."
Right.
That's like a fraction of what I felt. It was like all the weight on my shoulders
Hmm.
just became 10 times heavier.
Yeah.
And I thought, we have no other choice. Now, let me take you 4 months prior.
Okay.
In February of 2015, the bank comes to us and says, your line of credit needs to be renewed. In order for us to renew the credit, we need you to sign personally and drop 100,000 off of the credit line. So we were able to do that. Turns out that my dad and my mom and my wife and I all signed personally.
Okay.
Um, none of the other shareholders wanted to, so we ended up buying their shares. And so now doubly, we have the loss of the business, but now we've got a bank to contend with.
Yeah.
The only other option we had was to go through Chapter 7, which is a short but very intense proceeding.
Mm.
And I'll never forget my wife and I sitting at the dining room table going online. This was,
Yeah.
the whole credit counseling thing. We had to go through a course on credit
Oh,
counseling
really?
because we took a risk by signing personally because of what we believed in.
Yeah. Right.
We with $20 million in design coming up. We had a project coming up in June. We had a couple of good projects. We had 750 some projects in our
In your
history.
Yeah.
We were doing God's work,
Right.
right? So we
Building
linked
churches. Yeah.
right, building churches, and now we have no other choice but to do that. And it was a very humiliating process,
Yeah.
very soul searching,
Yes.
and that thrust me into like an 18 to 24-month process of I don't know who I am.
So the business is, the business is shut down then? Basically, is it July 2015? Basically, you have to go to the remaining 12 employees and say this,
Yeah.
we're shut.
Yeah,
This is it.
we've got insurance through July. We've negotiated that for you. Otherwise, you're on your own.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, my wife and I both worked in the business, so
Oh, I kept,
we lost we lost pretty much everything.
yeah, everything.
Total income of almost a nearly 30-year career in a family business, one family business, and along with it, my identity. It all just vanished.
And no real plans in place. So we obviously, in the exit planning world that we live in today, right? For our CEPAs that are listening to the show, what Scott is talking about, right, is falling to one of these 5Ds that we teach, right? These destroyers of companies, these unkind of planned events. And so, and just like that, it all went, but you didn't really do any exit strategy per se, did you?
No.
Like, right? There was nothing, because you're saying, look, I'm struggling. You're the personal planning guy today, but then you were like, I don't even know who I am.
It revealed so much of non-planning.
Yeah.
We were riding the ride. We had downturns, we had successes, like any business.
Yeah.
But we were just doing our thing. I experienced an unplanned, unwanted, untimely exit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just that, and there was no planning at all.
So the other question that I had too, thinking about like maybe lessons learned for our audience, is going back to that. It was interesting. You talked to me about it. It'd be cool for you to share. Is you finally put your finger on what wasn't working during that 2008 to 2015 time, right? Because that was a huge pivotal turn for you guys. Can you talk to us about what you were talking to me kind of off the air? Because you figured it out, that of how people were starting to build churches or how the people were looking. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because you did figure it out.
Yeah, we did figure it out 5 years too late.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What we discovered was that we had become very successful because all we did was churches. And so years and years, project after project, we get down to the final decision that a building committee was going to choose the contractor. And we had heard them say, well, we should go with this company because this is all they do.
And this
They
is your
they don't
specialty.
do churches along with all these others. They're church builders,
Mm.
and they also educate us. We put resources together. What do millennials think about church construction, and what you should think about when you design your building?
So huge value add.
Very,
Yeah.
very huge value add, and that's what we heard for nearly 40 years.
Yep.
But after 5 years, after 2008, they were not choosing us. They were not choosing us. And we could not figure out why, because for 40 years we got used to it.
Well, yeah.
Now, Jim Collins writes a book, and everybody knows what Jim Collins wrote. He wrote Good to Great.
Right.
Very few people know he wrote a book after that called How the Mighty Fall, because apparently some of the great companies never stayed great. And it was like he followed our story and documented our 5 stages. Now, the first stage of decline is what's called hubris born of success. That's what we suffered from. We were blind to what was really going on because we had hubris. We had churches who had told us, we're going to go with you because this is all you do. What we didn't see was a couple of key things. The building committee members themselves were facing personal financial struggles. And so they were naturally looking out for every penny from a personal standpoint. So they came to the building committees with that mindset. The second most powerful thing was that smaller contractors who in the past would never bid on the project of the church they attended because there's just too much risk.
Too much risk.
Now they're hungry.
Yeah. So
And so they all bid. And now what became less about let's hire the contractor who knew about churches to let's hire the best price.
Yeah, best price, or like let's give back to the community guy, right? Because you're all over the place, right? Like, so you're not necessarily attending that church, right? Like you live here in Ohio and you're building a church in Florida, right? But then you have the local Florida guy that attends your church, so he's probably a little bit cheaper than you, and he's one of their churchgoers.
Right.
So you're going to go.
So he's a known quantity
to
them.
Right.
We did not see that because we were still hung up on all we do is churches, and we're adding all this add value.
It's all wildly different than I would say your typical builder does.
So a downturn makes you think eventually about what's really going on, and that's why the board asked me to assume the role of CEO to reinvent the business. We got to figure out, we don't know what's going on, but we need you to help figure that out. So what we ended up doing was we had planned to take the next project that we were building and then set a parameter, I don't know, a 5, 10, 15, 20 mile radius around this project and canvass all the churches and say, come see this project. It's a living, breathing business card.
That's cool.
We'll show you what we do.
Cool.
And if you've got a small project that you have been putting off because of cost, we've got all the contractors mobilized. We can have them do something at lesser cost to you. And that's what we were going to do. We were going to take one project and build a small team that surrounded the local church market with regard to construction. And then we're going to do it somewhere else. And then somewhere else. I had a map where we had little blue dots that would pop up all over.
Yeah.
And instead of having district offices, we would have a team of about 4 or 5 people who would be in that radius.
Yeah.
And do all things construction, small projects, mid-sized project, and large. That was our plan.
I think that's a good plan, right? So now you're embedding yourself into the local community as well. So you're more with them versus like an outsider coming in.
Right.
And so, so now you're just jump back to what where you're landing your story, right? So July, we shut it down. And you said you spent you said about almost 2 years trying to figure out what was next for you, right?
Yeah. I flipped back and forth. I describe it as, do I go W-2 or 1099? W-2 or 10? I had on my desk, which is up in my son's bedroom, my home office. I had my computer on this side, working on my website for my business.
Okay.
And on this side of the desk was my iPhone with the Indeed app. And I would flip through and say, who's hiring? And
what kind of jobs were you looking for? Like CEO, COO kind of stuff?
Or local. I didn't really want to move because I had grandkids and kids.
Is that where the family business was started, that Youngstown area too? So like you have a rich history there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was the only child who never really left home.
Okay.
Except for college.
Yeah.
So I was born and raised in this area and I really didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
So that was a parameter that I had self-imposed on myself, a constraint.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I would flip back and forth, back and forth. Do I start? And I got excited about maybe getting into coaching because this is another string in this story.
Yeah,
Is
right.
back in 1999, one of my brothers said, we ought to look into life coaching as a benefit for our employees. Things are going great. Let's think about some things we can do. And Scott, why don't you do it? You're not already busy doing a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
I
being the
do this
younger
too.
brother, I was always, the
Yeah,
scapegoat.
yeah, yeah.
Turned out that was a very good thing for me
Mm,
because when I started looking into life coaching, I fell in love with the coaching dynamic.
yeah.
I ended up hiring my own coach and then I became certified as a coach and then started coaching pastors on the side.
Yeah.
Because a construction project is very stressful for a pastor.
Yeah, I would assume
And
so. Yeah, I would. I mean, I don't know anything about the church, but what I would say, somebody that's very like faith based, faith driven, and then have to take on this like big construction project. It doesn't seem like it kind of flows. Like it's like,
yeah,
yeah. So
there's a
it has to
constructor
be stressful.
mentality.
Well, and it's almost like you're such a community leader that all of your parishioners are kind of looking at you like saying, "Hey, we got to get this done." It has to be stressful for sure.
Yeah.
So the life coaching would help them.
Life coaching was a benefit.
Yeah.
But I never felt like I needed to break out of the family business and do that on my own. That was always a side thing. I
Yeah.
always did that on the side. So I was, I loved the coaching. Um, I knew that I had that capability,
Mm-hmm.
but I still didn't know who I was. That's a huge thing. My identity over time became synonymous with COO. I go to events and they would say, "So what do you do for a living?"
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm a COO of a multi-million-dollar family business that designs and builds churches across America." Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm
And
thinking,
it would spark a
okay,
whole series of conversations. That's a pretty
yeah,
unique business. I can't say that I've ever met anybody
right.
that specializes, to your point, in church building and then has such a large business that it's multi-generational and then across the United States. Like, yeah, that's got to be, and you got to be proud of that, right?
Oh, very
Yeah,
proud,
you're
very
proud.
proud. Yeah, it
So
was
you speak like
fantastic.
excited, like you're smiling right
Right.
now. And
Yeah.
so I totally get it because one of the reasons when Justin introduced us, I think because Justin and I are pretty close, though we're at different age points in our lives, I had the similar experience when I sold my landscaping company. Now I was only like 24 years old, but I had done that from like 15 years old to 24 years old and actually spent a couple of years at Ohio State's Agricultural Technical Institute in Worcester,
Okay.
majoring or attempting to major in landscape design and construction. And so I was quite literally Scott the landscaper. And it was cool for me being a young guy because I would walk into a room with a bunch of folks that were double my age at the bidding table.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of my competitive advantage is that we also did like value added work. So we did properties that use their image to sell their products. So like a assisted living facility, right? You don't want to put your mom or dad in something that looks like crap when you drive in, right?
Right.
Because it's going to be their new home. But the value add is we would design cut flower programs and then raise planter boxes so they could like ride out there on their
Okay.
wheelchair
Yeah.
and be able to interact with plants and vegetables. And we would just do that if we won the contract as a value add. And so to your point, and being a very similar story, Scott,
Yeah.
is that I never really moved. Right, I've been born and raised in Olmsted Falls, Ohio, and have really never left. And even when I was commuting to I would commute down to Worcester so I could work and not live on campus, right? So I was still living in this area.
Yeah.
And a big volunteer, and I grew up very Catholic family as well, so very involved in the church and stuff. And so I've been just ingrained in the community so people would know who I am. Like, oh, that's Scott, the landscaping guy. He does all these cool cut flower programs and he does incredible work. You should totally work with him if you have a facility like this. But then when I sold that, both my dad and I were talking about this at the end of the year on a show where it was like twofold. One, it was probably just time we were hit by the recession. I remember the story I told on air with Dad was an $80,000 contract came back and said, Scott, well, we need to make some pretty big cuts. We need you to do it for $40,000 this year. And I'm like, I just can't. I'm a small company. Like I can't absorb that.
Right.
And so we also had a similar, it's really weird talking to you because a very similar story where we went from like 18 or 20 people down to like a 6 or 10 person crew, like just cut it in half. And so I was feeling at the time that it was we were cruising, and I liked my small business still, but you could feel like you take so many hits in a time like that where you're like, man, you're starting to think maybe I could do something else. And then we got an offer to do it. And Dad said, hey, why don't you come work with me? And I like Dad's business, Dad being a SEPA, consultant, where he looked across many different companies. So now I could work with guys like you that build churches, people that had manufacturing companies. I thought that was interesting. So we ended up taking the deal and selling. And I quite literally think the next week I saw my truck driving down the street with my friggin' logo on it. And I was like, what a bummer, man. And I'm like now in this suit and tie sitting in Dad's office, and I'm like in a cubicle,
Yeah.
and I'm an employee. I didn't own Dad's, any part of Dad's consulting business. Just a total, just a total mind game. It had to be for you too, trying to figure out. Mine was about 18 months where I kind of figure out what we did until we bought the Exit Planning Institute, and I kind of fell back in love with being a business owner. It's pretty wild and tough ride.
Yeah. Yeah. Who am I?
Yeah.
That's the key question was, who am I?
Yeah, outside of being COO is where he started that, right?
Yeah.
So I want to get into, we got to take a quick break. So I want to get to that like aha moment that actually just came pretty recently, right? And during 2020, where you figured out who that was and what you're doing today. So give us a quick couple minutes. We'll be right back.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial, and with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the second edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a SEPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. So going on a cool a journey here. So now we've talked through Scott's family business story. And now, as you heard me kind of open the show, Scott is helping business owners and business executives with identity, with figuring out who they are as a business owner and outside of the business, and helping to personal plan. And for me, I love having folks like Scott on because for those of you that are followers of EPI, the three-legged stool concept is really the organizing principle for everything that we own, that we do. And we'll talk a little bit about generation because it would be interesting for somebody that is kind of boots on the ground and working with owners. owners in their 30s are different than their 40s, different than their 50s, and different than their 60s. But I think all of us as business owners kind of struggle with personal planning. So now you're on your second business here, and you had this aha moment in 2020. So talk us through how you started your business today.
Yeah. So when we closed the business, both my wife and I lost our income and career. My wife landed a job 2 months later, which allowed us to have health insurance and a little cash. And so she was doing that. I was, like I said, just flipping back and forth, W-2, 1099, and W-2. And I began to think, okay, I've got this coaching thread. I've got this COO thread. I've got the CEO thread. What do I do with this? And so there was internally, I was already starting to think there's something here that I can weave together. They were like ingredients. It was like I was sitting in a kitchen with all these ingredients and I didn't know the recipe. I knew there was something I could put together, but I didn't know what it was. August 2020, my wife comes to me and she says, "Did you know today is my 5th year anniversary
Of being employed
of this new company?" And that hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like all of a sudden, it's like, no, it's not been 5 years.
Yeah, time flies.
It really flew.
Yeah.
And I looked back and said, just messing around with W-2 1099, and here she is, bless her heart, working in this job for 5 years, that I hit the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I got serious. I thought, okay, I've got to pick a direction and go with it. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I am going to start this thing. So I hired a branding coach, spent four months with her. And out of that came this idea that, okay, the exit that I experienced when I was 50.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at that in terms of a Gen X. Maybe I'm uniquely qualified to work with Gen X people, right? Now, that was a stepping stone to another step where I began to look at the average lifespan of an American male, which was 78.5 years or so. I rounded at 80. Broke it into 4 20-year segments.
Yep.
And the first 20 years is your learning quarter.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you're being nurtured and going to school. The second is your building quarter, your 20s and 30s. You're building your career, your family, your name. The third quarter I call the reaping quarter. This is your 40s and 50s, where you begin to start reaping the benefits of what you've built in your second quarter. And in the fourth quarter, I call it the impacting quarter. That's the quarter where you have more impact than any other previous quarter because you've got time, resources, you've got experience, which gives you wisdom and knowledge. And you combine that with a sense of urgency from a heightened sense of mortality.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
When you combine all those, you can do more in your fourth quarter than all previous quarters combined. So I started thinking about that, which led me to, I'm going to hold the shingle out and say, I'm a fourth quarter strategic planning partner or coach.
Yeah.
So that became the monocle, the fourth quarter coach. And what I do is help people prepare for that fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So that was the epiphany. That was the recipe. That was taking my story and leveraging that story for the benefit of others.
Yeah, that's an incredible way to think through it too, and just like the age groups and the quarters as well. And I do, like, to your point, if you get all kind of 4 or 5 things that you talked about in line in the fourth quarter, you could be the most impactful you might be in your entire life in that fourth quarter. So you look at these. The other cool thing that I find in talking to you is, you talk about strategic planning, but strategic planning as in personal planning as well. Like, as owners, we do, everybody's always telling us, like, work on your business, not in your business, strategic plans, 1-year visions, strategy. We don't ever really relate that same type of thinking and framework to our personal life. So can you talk through how you think about this? Because one of the things I think for the business owners listening, where EPI gets a critique, is sometimes this personal planning stuff becomes very soft. And so they pivot from it because they're like, there's no like substance to it, and I don't know what to do. But in working with you, you have like you have elements, strategic planning that makes it almost like the owners who are working, or maybe it is like the owners working on the business side of things, where we're working in 90-day sprints, we're working in 1-year plans, 3-year visions. So just like you would be growing value in your business, you're actually aligning your personal life as well. Can you talk through the way you think through personal planning?
Yeah, the elements of strategic planning, which all business owners understand, their purpose, your vision, their mission, strategic initiatives.
Yeah.
We just take those elements and apply it personally.
Yeah.
And the 6 strategic initiatives is kind of the framework. Who I have my clients ask 3 questions. Who do you want to be?
Mm.
What do you want to do? And what do you want to have? And ask those for all 6 hallmarks. I call it hallmarks of a fantastic fourth quarter. Spiritually anchored, physically fit, relationally rich, emotionally healthy, vocationally aligned, and financially free. So these are 6 perspectives. You walk around your life and say, who do I want to be spiritually? Who do I want to be physically? And I pull a little bit from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where you adopt the identity of who you want to be and then prove it to yourself, as opposed to waiting until some future date. I'm going to be that person a year from now if I follow this. I promote the idea of saying, wake up in the morning and say, what would a spiritually anchored person do in this situation? What would a physically fit person do? What would a vocationally aligned person do? And so you actually we work heavy on the front end defining what that means to each of them, because it's unique to every person. One person's definition of being spiritually anchored will be totally different from someone else. So we work on that and develop that. It really becomes very simple. You basically run every decision through that matrix, that process. And then when things happen or you're faced with the decision, now it's like no longer a pro versus con. It's a 6 hallmark. If I chose to exit this business, what would that do to me spiritually? What would that do to me physically, relationally, emotionally, vocationally, and financial? Vocationally, by the way, I define vocation not in terms of the job that you do, but what you give your time, energy, and attention to. So it's more of a broader perspective, especially in the exit process, because a lot of times owners think, I don't know what I'm running to. If I'm not owning and running this business, what am I doing?
Right.
Well, that cognitive dissonance that takes place inside is a vocational misalignment that's coming.
Yeah.
But when you step back and say, it's not the job, it's not the business, it's what you give your time, energy, and attention to. It's just that you've given your time, energy, and attention to this business for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Right.
Pick it up and give your time, energy, and attention to something else, and you become vocationally aligned within your exit. So you're not just exiting, you're actually entering. It becomes less of a transaction and more of a threshold into something else. I think it's interesting how we talk about a graduation and commencement at high school or college as though it's the end.
Yeah.
But when you step back and look at those words, you are graduating.
Right.
You're commencing.
Right.
It's actually the beginning.
It is the beginning.
And so exit planning, to me, I look at it deeper and I think, what is it that you're exiting to?
Yeah.
You have to,
you said you have to have a place that you're running towards.
Yeah.
I really like the vocation alignment, because you're absolutely right. Like, I was trying to think about myself and what I'm passionate about doing. And if you took some of those things that just flashed through my mind, I could be doing that in this business, Exit Planning Institute. I could be doing this in coaching, and maybe coaching a soccer team. I could do this in owning another different small business. I could do it on a board. I could do it as a teacher. If those are all, so that is a good way. I think, just to your point, that's just a simple way to actually think about it, and really frames it in a different light, I think, for many owners. I don't know if the audience is feeling that way, but for me, just a bunch of light bulbs just went off.
Yeah. Usually that is the experience when we talk about identity.
Yeah.
Your identity is who you are.
Of course.
Your job as owner, your label as owner, is an expression of that identity. When I express that, and when my clients begin to catch hold of that concept, that my role as the business owner is not my identity, it's an expression of my identity.
Right.
It frees up everything. Now all of a sudden it's not this, I have to hold on to this role and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I talk about it being a trapeze artist. You know,
Yeah.
you start your business and you get going and everything, and then you let go and there's no bar to grab hold of. Yeah. He's like,
Yeah.
so they hang on. The worst thing is they hang on and come back.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever swung on a cliff.
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
If you don't let go at the peak and go into the water, you come back and slam against the
The rock.
cliff.
Yeah.
And you know, we all know of situations where owners stayed too long, and they're like cheese in the refrigerator stays too long. They do more harm than good by staying.
No, I think that's super interesting. So you mentioned also Gen X. And so last year we debuted the National State of Owner Readiness Survey. And a big thing within that was the generational shift and mindset and meeting owners where they are. And so do you see, I'm assuming you likely have clients across generations, but do you see that generational shift? Are people in their 40s and 50s more aligned to your messaging versus somebody that's in their 60s and 70s? And how do you work with each one of those generations? But we laughed. We always talk about this. The baby boomers are like the inventors of the 60-hour work week, and one of their core values is very wanting to feel success, right? Whereas perhaps people that are in Generation X, or I think of them as a major core value for them is their time. So freedom, balance. They're a technology generation, so certainly working smarter, not harder, and that kind of a line. So, you know, going into different groups, you have to have different maybe messaging. Can you just talk about how your work affects or how your work blends into the different generations that we see in the market today?
There are a lot of dimensions.
There are, yeah.
To answer your question.
Yeah.
Yes, there are mindsets as to hard work versus time. And that is true. And to that degree, it is harder to talk to a person who is inclined to that badge of honor that
Yes.
I haven't taken a vacation in 30 years. That's a badge of honor.
Right.
It's like, are you curious? Are you serious?
Yeah, right.
It's like, how do you, I mean, I'm a big proponent that we don't rest from our work. We work from our rest.
Right.
And that's probably because I'm a Gen X kind of person.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But I think it doesn't matter what age group you are. The concept of identity and the struggle, especially in America and especially for the male ego,
Yes.
it's across the board. We all struggle with that identity component, maybe differently,
Yeah,
but it's still part of the human condition,
absolutely.
right? But yes, it's harder to get a baby boomer to think in terms of, thinking of themselves.
Yeah.
It's easier for a Gen Xer or a millennial to think of themselves. That's easier. So the strategic planning concept is easier to express and deal with. But I talk a lot about the fact that we go through seasons and stages. Seasons are things that come and go. You break your leg, you can't drive until it heals. You get the cast off, now you can drive again. Seasons come to pass, right?
Yes.
They're gone. But stages are things that we go through, and those stages, like for example, I ran the Pittsburgh Marathon in my mid-30s.
Yeah.
If I were to do that at 59, I would have to. It'd be a whole different.
A whole different training module here.
Maybe I could do it, but it would be different because I'm at a different stage of life. I can't go back to that other stage. What the significance of the stages is our perspective on life.
Yeah.
Now, a millennial will still go through the same stages. They're going to become 60, 70.
Of course.
Right. And there's this crazy thing that there's so many weeks, lifespan.
Yeah.
And at some point we all awaken to mortality.
Mm-hmm.
We have an awakening. That's what I look for. I look for, do you have that spark where you begin to think legacy, meaning, and purpose in our lives? So strategic planning, yes, it's more widely accepted. Here's the other thing that goes on. It's a lot of dimensions, but working in the system versus on the system.
Yeah.
We are so busy as business owners working in the system. We are doing so many things in the system that we don't have time to break out and think strategically.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, if you're a football fan, you understand what a quarterback does.
Mhm.
If you ever see a good quarterback, when they go to punt, the quarterback's off on the sideline, puts the headphones on, is looking at the Surface tablet, and is communicating to the offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator can see the entire field. And he says, we need to double team 68. And number 45 is watching everything you're throwing, so stop looking where you're going to throw. So the quarterback then takes off the headphones, puts down the Surface tablet, goes back out smarter the next set of downs than they did before. That is a cadence that I think is missing and is so needed, especially if you're planning an exit, because if you have not done this cadence of working in the system and then working on the system, when it comes to an exit scenario, which is a very disruptive, it's one of the most disruptive things in a business owner's life.
Totally.
If you haven't done that cadence, then you're having to do it all within that short period of time.
Right. Yeah. Which is just jarring because it's already a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you're prepared, right, and you're going through that with your offensive coordinator, you're prepared for that next play.
And you guys talk about it.
Yeah.
Start now. Your exit. Don't wait. It's not like selling a house.
Not at all.
Can't
Right.
think of it that way.
No,
You got to think long term,
you do.
and that's the challenge, I think, is universal across all.
Yeah.
Now, we have attitudes that are more inclined to think strategically when we're younger.
Yeah.
But it's
Fascinating work, right? So
it is.
as we kind of hit the top of the hour here, you're in the second business, and over the last 4 years, kind of what have you learned in this like new sense of entrepreneurship comes to mind for you?
I think the most significant thing for me is what I thought was this huge life-ending disruption.
Yeah.
Is now, it's like a one-to-many.
Yeah.
The opportunity that I get every morning to wake up and educate and coach and train people on living strategically, living by design, that's born out of what it was like to be living by default and then have this storm. I wasn't prepared for the storm. Helping people prepare for the storm is I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Isn't it weird how it all kind of unfolds and comes back together? It's great. So I appreciate you coming up and hanging out with us in Cleveland for the hour or so that we've been hanging out here. Again, you'll see Scott at the Exit Planning Summit, and you'll see him inside of our EPI Academy. So we're really looking forward to building that relationship with you. And I really do think you have something incredible. So you'll see him around the community, folks. Thanks for spending some time with us here.
Thank you, Scott.
We'll see you guys next time. Our next show is February 19th. So subscribe, listen, and leave a review in all of your podcast platforms. Thanks, guys.